Hello, everyone. Welcome to TSAM Digital. My name is Anna, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Sarah Chapman. She's the Global Chief Sustainability Officer for Manulife. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. It's a great pleasure to speak to you today. Today, before we get started, I was wondering maybe you could tell us a few words about yourself and about the work that you do at Manulife.
Sure. I have the great pleasure of being the Global Chief Sustainability Officer at Manulife, which essentially means I oversee our ESG-related strategy, reporting, and disclosure. And specifically overseeing from an operational perspective our climate action plan, which covers both our operations, our investments, and our products and services with respect to how we are addressing the transition to a net zero economy. I also oversee our community investment portfolio and global partnerships. So all things related to sort of environmental and social impact at the organization. And Manulife, as you may know, is a global life and health insurance company, as well as Manulife Investment Management on the asset management side of things.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for the intro. I mean, I'm super excited to delve into things. So you actually recently spoke on a panel about ensuring that the right CX efforts are focused on the right issues. So I was wondering if you can share maybe your view on how investment firms can go beyond the branding hype and what really makes a difference for their investment strategies.
So the reality in this space is that if we do not address the costs and impacts to investors on some of these critical ESG related issues, we know that the impact of that will be far greater over the long term if we don't address them now. So I always talk about this it's about risk mitigation and value creation. So on the risk side of things, when we're thinking about things like mitigating climate change as an example, that is an economic imperative because we know that the overall costs of unmitigated climate change to society actually far outweigh the costs of mitigation. Now, on the opportunity side, we know that there will be new companies that come out of addressing some of these critical issues that are building businesses which actually help to solve these critical issues. So this is going to create greater investment opportunities for investors that are really looking to drive sustainable alpha over the long term. So fundamentally, this is about good business, both from a risk mitigation and a value creation side of things.
That's really fascinating. And if I may, can I ask a follow-up question? Because I find it really interesting. You mentioned the connection with risk, which I feel is quite important. And I was wondering, can you expand a little bit about how closely you work with your risk teams on sort of a regular basis? I think that's quite interesting for our audience.
Yeah, we're seeing a much greater integration across all industries in the context of sort of risk management strategy, and obviously, with the lens of ESG. So, I think as part of the other things that have been driving that, if you look at things like the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, really setting out expectations with respect to risk management in this space. So we're seeing a greater integration there. And again, that points to that risk mitigation side, but also that opportunity side.
Thank you so much. So, as a sustainability leader, what do you see as the most pressing matters right now that corporations have to address on their path to building a sustainable future?
So I think about this in two different lenses. One is sort of thematically, and the other one is sort of, the systems around how we address these issues. So thematically, obviously climate remains a critical issue. We know that climate-related weather disasters alone have already cost over, I think, $145 billion in 2021 in the United States alone. So that's just a small foreshadowing of the exponential rise, in cost if climate change is not addressed. We think about things like the loss of crops resulting from higher temperature world, the costs that people will incur from relocating, from properties that are vulnerable to coastal erosion or rising water levels. So climate remains a critical issue. We're certainly seeing biodiversity and nature as an extension, really coming to the forefront now. And of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion sort of rounds out the top three issues, that I think, people and corporations are certainly focused on. That's thematically. When we think about systems-wise, anyone who works in this space right now knows that the regulatory landscape is changing rapidly, not just in North America, but particularly in Asia, changing very rapidly. And it's also becoming a highly politicized issue in some countries. And so, corporations are certainly trying to get their hands wrapped around, I would say the building consensus, in the regulatory environment, but particularly as we think about, the geopolitical issues that come with some of these issues, the worry is that does slow progress down, amongst companies and industries. So that's something that I think all corporations are grappling with, both in their own investments and their operations.
So actually more and more companies are starting to look beyond the E and the G in ESG. And I do know that you're very passionate about social impact. So I was wondering if you can share some of the struggles that the industry is grappling with and maybe some success stories as well.
Sure. So I'll focus my comments here on this concept of the just transition, which is really, starting to intersect on the E and the S. So fundamentally, if we just take climate as an example, addressing climate change involves multiple approaches: incentives, fiscal measures, new and improved standards, as we've already talked about. At the same time, there are short-term costs, and we really need to understand who those costs are going to fall on versus who gains in this transition. So a just transition is really, important to ensure the widespread sort of support and to avoid delays that, may result in greater climate change. So it's really about this concept of fairness being an integral part of the fiscal policy response to climate change. And so this is, I think one of the things that the industry is struggling in terms of who is going to be affected by some of this transition in the most immediate term. And yet at the same time, that's where, again, the opportunity is to drive, true impact both on the social and the environmental side. So in some ways, it's being seen as this tension, but as we look at it through the concept of a just transition, we have to be looking at, broadly the E and the S together as we address these issues and not in silos.
It's really interesting, and I'm very much looking forward to see how things progress, and obviously to keep in touch with you on the spaces, and then maybe we can obviously update our audience as well on that.
For sure.
But lastly, also wanted to see whether there are some positive initiatives that you have been excited about lately, and maybe do you have something you can share with us and something to look forward to in the future?
Sure. So I'll maybe focus on timber and agriculture to a certain extent as natural climate solutions. So Manulife is one of the largest institutional managers of timber and agriculture in the world. And forests and farms are natural, what we call carbon sinks, that actually can biologically remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and have the potential to provide an estimated 37% of the CO2 mitigation required over the next decade to stabilize global warming to below 2 degrees. So we believe that there's a significant opportunity as timber as a natural climate solution, and we're actually really well positioned to seek positive climate impact and to invest in assets that create carbon sequestration and other conservation opportunities. See my point about biodiversity and nature that are actually derived from forests for the benefit of our clients. And so, we are working very hard on what we call impact first investments that really meet the needs of those who are interested in offsetting carbon emissions and who may value other positive environmental or social impacts as well as generating financial returns. So just as an example, we recently acquired, as as Manulife a significant impact first asset that really was part of the execution of our climate action plan that we released in May of 2021, where we committed to accelerate the development of investment strategies, again, specifically in the natural climate solutions space, and strategies that specifically capture more carbon per dollar invested. So we are excited about those opportunities. We see clients being excited about those opportunities, and we're excited about this asset to continue to meet the objectives of carbon sequestration, but also positive climate impact for our own portfolio and for clients.
That is really impressive, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing this with our audience. I think they'll all find it fascinating. And honestly, we are very grateful for your time today. We'd definitely love to talk again. And yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna, for having me.